Ensure your cell phones are off or on silent. Council members, ensure your microphones are turned on.
You do look spiffy, I'll tell you what.
I don't know what it is. People are just dressing up today, looking sharp.
You dress the part. You walk the walk.
All right, today is Monday, May 22nd, 2023. It is 6:01 p.m. It is a regular legislative meeting for Barberton City Council, but before we begin our regular legislative meeting, we will jump into our individual committee meetings for this evening. And we will start with City Properties, Parks and Recreation with Mr. Jaber.
Thank you, Mr. President. City Properties Park Recreation meetings, May 22nd, 2023 is 6:01. Council members present, myself as chair, Mr. Heidick, Ms. Fry, and other council members and guests are also noted. We have no new request legislation, but we have a couple of pending legislation. Title Impact Policy Adoption and Ordinance, rescinding ordinance number 155-2016 and adopting the project impact policy and declaring an emergency. Any questions? All right, seeing none. Next one, ordinance number 75-2023, project impact policy ordinance, amending ordinance number 109-2015 to sell properties that have been placed in the city land bank in accordance with the city project impact policy, declaring emergency. Any questions or concerns? All right, seeing none. The next couple of them are present together. Is for the purchase of parkland. We have ordinance number 77, 2023, ordinance number 78, 2023, and ordinance 79, 2023. That's the parkland sales for College Park, Harder Park, and Conrad Park. Any questions or concerns? Mrs. Fry?
I was going to ask, do you think that we should go ahead and suspend the rules and vote on them this evening because of the fact that if we go through readings that
Excuse
cannot be ordered?
I got it.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Counselor. He's unplugging that. I could not hear
Oh,
what you
okay.
said.
I'm sorry. I thought you were
Thank
going to
you.
say something, and I thought,
No,
I said, do you think that we should maybe suspend the rules tonight and vote on these so that they can go ahead and make the purchase from DWA for the park equipment?
Okay. I want to have that Mr. Heidick answer that, because since he did request this.
Mhm.
Mr. Heidick?
I requested 3 readings so that we would have time for citizen input at council. It's up to the chairman.
Has anybody had any concerns or questions from residents or
I've had nothing.
anybody? Mayor, have you heard anything
I've heard from a few residents who object to it.
for all 3 or just for one park? All 3 parks? Mr.
That's
Griffin?
the same with me, Mr. Jaber. I'm in contact with different people, and everybody in Ward 3, I know, is opposed to College Street Park. Shut it down. Now, maybe some other, they were talking about repurposing the other park. If it could not be sold, could we do something to repurpose it? But other than that, that's all I've heard.
Ms. Angela?
The only thing I heard is the plan. What, if you're going to sell the parks, what are you going to do with it? I thought, I don't know. Call Mr. Heidi, because I have no idea. I don't see a plan, I didn't hear of a plan, or anything of that sort. So I think if you're going to sell park property, green space, then maybe on the other side, you should have a plan of why and what we can do with that. Just have a plan for that. And I didn't have an answer, so.
Ms. Thompson?
I've heard opposition for both College and Conrad, but haven't heard anything about Harder.
Any other concerns, questions? So, you said it would slow us down from ordering the equipment, correct?
So that we could go ahead and order the equipment, because with this looming, the sale, I mean, you wouldn't have a park to put it in. I mean, I don't think that it's going to pass, but at the same time, you have to get this cleaned up before we can vote on the equipment. And as Mrs. Angeloff alluded to, I think that we need to dig into this a little deeper. I'm not opposed to selling parks. I'm opposed to selling college. I'm not opposed to selling parks, but I am opposed to doing things without discussion, without plans, without any idea what you're going to do with the green space. We do have too many parks, which makes it difficult to maintain all of them, but I think that possibly harder could be repurposed for flooding and things of that nature, maybe a billboard, as was mentioned. Conrad, I'm not sure what they would do, but it's really not a park. It's like a piece of equipment you would have in your own backyard, so there's not a lot of people there. A lot of people don't even know it exists. So I just think that we should have a plan in place. And with all the projects that we are starting this summer, I don't think we need to dig into another project. That's just my opinion.
We can do some more homework on this, and if we need to, we'll do a special meeting next week so we can make the process.
Can't do it.
No.
Can't do a special meeting.
Oh, no?
It's already been called out.
We called it out then, but just since we had different people who are wanting and not wanting, maybe just keep it open till that happens and we'll just go from there.
One more thing, Chair. The ballot language says authorizing the mayor with approval from city council. It is not a requirement to sell the park. If it was moved to the ballot and passed by 2/3 of the voters, it is not a requirement that the mayor spend all of his day trying to solicit bids for a park or try to sell it. It would have to be the executive branch and legislative branches on the same page. It would not be an absolute requirement. That's barring that 2/3 of the voters in the city approve it. But I do believe that they should have the opportunity to have the say here and on the ballot.
I agree with you on that one, Mrs.
Okay.
Porter.
I don't even see the purchase for the playground equipment is not even here tonight.
No, ma'am.
That's like on hold until we take care of whether or not we're selling the park.
That playground equipment, is there a plan that you're hoping that the money goes away because we've drug this out so that that's a reason to sell College Park?
From what the law director said, the money's still gonna be there.
The extra money, the
gap.
gap money will be gone.
It won't be
Did
gone.
the law director give us a time, say there was a time or an expiration date?
She said
No.
that they could tell us any time. But I agree, I've not had one person say they're in favor of this, selling any of our parks without better plans from the park
Commission.
commission as to what is going to happen when we sell it. What do they plan on doing? How are they planning to
And how much?
distribute it and how much and things like that? The people that talked to me were not at all interested in rushing through this and 42 days. They would rather see us put this on, take this out and go through a discussion and come up with a plan with the Parks Commission and then put it to the ballot so they have better information. This is very cloudy.
I appreciate your opinion. As chair, I'm gonna go ahead and keep this on there for our 2 readings, and we'll vote on this as council together. Any other questions, concerns? All right, any miscellaneous discussion?
Mr. Jaber,
Yes, sir.
can't we vote on College Park tonight?
He said no.
You don't want to?
No, sir, we'll wait all 3, just in case any more residents or, constituents want to come in, have their concerns. All right. Any
Do you have evidence of citizens reaching out to you or you? Because you're telling all 6 of us that we have to wait till more citizens. Have they reached out to you?
I'm not saying that we have to wait for more citizens. I'm saying the citizens should be afforded the opportunity.
Have you heard from any since you brought this forward?
I have not, but I also don't know what the next 4 or 5 weeks entail.
Ms.
I have a
Angelo?
question.
Yes.
Wasn't to enter into a contract for the parks, for that equipment at College Street was before the sale of College Street?
Yes.
Yes.
So that's no question whatsoever. We need to vote on that because that came before the sale of the property,
A month before.
a month before.
Yeah.
If I'm correct, weren't they on the agenda at the same time?
They were on a month before.
The actual purchase of College Park?
Yes.
The purchase of the playground equipment was brought up a month before.
It was on the same agenda, on the same
second
committee
time-
meeting.
The second time.
Correct.
The
I
first
think
time was
It was
a
in
month
March,
before.
I think is when it came up.
Because we had to find out, he wanted it for college.
Mr. Patterson?
Yeah, I submitted legislation over a month ago.
Yeah.
It got put on hold. You all told me to take it back to my commission and have them vote on it. And that's what happened. We brought it back, and then that's when the law director submitted the letter for you all not to vote on it.
But that was a month
Over
before
one.
this.
That was a separate piece of legislation. We appropriated the money, what came from, on the same agenda sheet, was the request to move to the ballot the 3 parks, and the purchase explicitly for College Park came on the same agenda sheet. Am I wrong?
That came on the same agenda sheet, but it was proposed for College Park a month before.
Wait, I have the letter. This is addressed to Mr. Jaber, and it's dated March 28th from Mr. Patterson. Please call for the necessary legislation at the next Committee of the Whole meeting to approve the use of funds in the Parks Maintenance Capital for the replacement of the structure at College Street. That was March 28th.
If I'm wrong, didn't we have contention to pull the word College Park out of there so that the money could be appropriated?
They were asked to talk to their commission to see about it being put in another park. And the commission came back the next week and said, no, it was going in College Park.
It seemed to have hit the agenda sheet at the same time, so, Chair, this is up to you, but
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and
It was
just keep it on there.
It was first.
We'll just keep it on there and just wait for the council members to vote altogether. And myself, I don't want to sell the College Park, but still, I just want to keep it going and like, out of respect for Mr. Heidick, and if he has anybody else wants to reach out to him, and before then, we'll go from there. Miscellaneous discussion from anybody?
Well, I missed the whole thing. I'm sorry. What was your decision as chairperson? To leave it on for 3
Yes, ma'am.
readings?
Yes, ma'am.
To sell it? Nothing to do with the playground equipment?
Correct.
So we have 2 pieces of legislation. So the playground was first, asking for the necessary legislation, but we're just going to void that because the second thing was selling College Park?
We're now, the first thing not even on our agenda. Mrs. Bailey?
Can I ask Mr. Patterson, was that a 6-month out time frame?
Yes.
So we wouldn't even have this by winter, even if we ordered it at this point, correct?
We would have had it by September.
Again, thanks for everybody's concerns and questions. Any miscellaneous discussion? Mr. Patterson?
I mean, we're just working hard on projects. Mike and I, we checked out a skate park, moving forward with other projects.
I appreciate it. We did have some problems at Crispin Park yesterday. Any updates on the camera systems, or?
The equipment's ordered, just waiting for it to come in.
I think we had 2 females get arrested last night, I think around 6 or 7 o'clock. I think some camera footage would have helped out with that situation with the investigation. Hope we get them soon. Thank you, Mr. Patterson. Any other miscellaneous discussion? Or Mrs.
I have one more point to make about the letter from Mr. Patterson. He even asked us for emergency reading. There's the letter.
Yeah, March 28th.
And March the 9th, it was approved by the commission.
Thank you.
Mr. Jaber?
Oh, yes, Mrs. Wilburn.
You said in respect for one person, you're disrespecting the other
No,
five.
don't twist the words. Nobody's
That's what you
disrespecting.
said.
Excuse me,
Nobody's disrespecting,
if we
ma'am.
want to talk about disrespect, if I hear somebody say, "What a joke," under their breath again, that's a little disrespectful,
I
don't
didn't
you
say
think?
that.
I'm not pointing a finger at you.
You don't have to, I did,
Yeah.
and you're out of order.
Am I?
Yes,
Mr.
you are.
President?
Because you know that letter was first. The letter was first for the playground. Okay.
Yes, sir. All right, seeing no more miscellaneous discussion, have a motion to adjourn, please.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Heidick.
And I will second it.
Thank you. And we adjourn at 6:16. And with that, I pass, sir.
Next up, public welfare and safety.
Thank you, Mr. President. The time is 6:18 PM. The date is May 22nd, 2023. We are in council chambers, and I am bringing the Public Welfare and Safety Committee meeting to order. All members of my committee are here, me being chairman, Mr. Griffin, and Mrs. Coburn as members of the committee. All council people are present, as well as guests as noted on my sheet. There are no requests for new legislation. However, we do have one piece of legislation that we'll be voting on this evening, and it is to enter into contract with Atlantic Emergency Solutions, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into contract with Atlantic Emergency Solutions in the amount of $875,439 to purchase a Pierce Saber pumper, state bid pricing and declaring an emergency. And Mr. Flaker explained how this lease purchase would work last week. Does anybody have any comments on this? Okay. I'm going to open it up for miscellaneous discussion. Does anybody have any safety or welfare questions for my committee? Mr. Greer.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to get an update, maybe possibly on, forgive me, I have to reach out before, on the clock camera system. Do we have any analytics or stats on what it helped us?
I have had no communication about the flock cameras, other than they have been responsible for finding a few criminals. But other than that, I do not know.
Awesome. Thank you. Sorry.
That's all right. Mr. Jaber?
Thank you, Mrs. Fry. The fog cameras were used on that Mother's Day shooting. They're by Scoops in the hospital. So that did help one case right there. So definitely improving and helping in the city with the city forces.
Thank you. Hearing no other questions, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Motion made by Mrs. Coburn and seconded by
Shorter.
Mr. Griffin. And we are adjourned at 6:21 PM. Thank you.
I have to read that.
Next up is rural marketing development.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. President. Rules Marketing Development. I would like to call this meeting to order today, May 22nd. Time is 6:20. All members are present and all others noted. Tonight, we have no requests for legislation. Do anyone in the gallery or the council persons have any miscellaneous discussion for rules of marketing? Yes, Mr.
Thank you, Chair. Last week I mentioned about checking in with rules and stuff. I'm just going to send out some suggestions or ideas for some of the rule things that we've ran into. By no means is this a formal request or anything, or even to move forward with anything, but I do want to open up the discussion between council. Not today, but down the road on one more kind of iteration on some rules and see if council even deems it necessary to make any rule changes. So,
Thank you, Mr. Brett. Do we have any more discussion for rules? Hearing none, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Mrs. Taylor.
I will second that.
Thank you, Mr. Heidick. We adjourn at 6:22. Look at our pass.
thank you, Mr. Griffin. Next up is City Utilities with Mrs. Coburn.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to call to order the city utilities. It's 6:23, May 22nd, in council chambers. All members are present, myself as chair, Carol Fry, and Erica Bailey. All other council members and others are noted on my sheet. We have no request for legislation. We have no pending legislation. I will open it up for miscellaneous discussion. Anyone? The only thing I'd like to mention is that all of the streets that are going to be worked on this year have the camera guys going up and down the street to see if we have any leaks in our sewer or storm drains. And so there's a lot of blockage getting ready for that, a lot of single lane and things like that. So that's an indication of the work that's to come. Anything else from anyone else?
I have a
Hearing-
question.
Yes, ma'am. Mrs.
Do you know when they're going to start on the dam? Or no?
Well, not till after Thursday.
I hope so.
Okay, all right, well, you knew.
We don't have an actual date for
Okay,
that at this
all right.
time, but they are prepping for it.
Okay.
And we're excited for it. So if there's nothing else, may I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion.
I'm assuming you're seconding.
Yes, I am.
We're adjourned at 6:24.
Thank you. You had to nudge me.
Thank you, Mrs. Coburn. Next up, Finance and Personnel, Mr. Wright.
Thank you, Mr. President. Finance and Personnel, it is 6:23, Monday, May 22nd, 2023. We're in council chambers. The committee is present, which consists of Councilors Coburn, Thompson, President Greer, and myself as chair. All others noted. Request for legislations, as always, is reserved for committee of the whole night. In front of us now is Ordinance 72, 2023, Lease Purchase Ordinance, Fire Truck Acquisition Project, an ordinance authorizing the execution of a municipal lease purchase agreement between Freedom Financial or such other entity as provided herein as lessor and the city as lessee for the purpose of acquiring a fire pumper truck together with all related appurtenances thereto for use by the city and declaring an emergency. Are there any comments on this? All right, well, miscellaneous discussion. Any from the committee?
I have none.
None? Body? From the gallery? Seeing none, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you. We are adjourned at 6:24.
Thank you, Mr. Heidick. That concludes our individual committee meetings for this evening. We'll take a
Oh, yeah.
5-minute break and come back and begin our regular legislative meeting.
There's a
But the other one, like I've heard from enough people that they want to keep that park, that's.
All right, we're going to begin. Please ensure your cell phones are off or on silent. Council members, again, please ensure your microphones are turned on.
Well, everybody does things last minute, huh?
Well, it was from me and one of the first.
I got a couple others by me.
All right, this is a regular legislative meeting of Barberton City Council. Today is Monday, May 22nd, 2023. I call this meeting to order at 6:36 p.m. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by invocation by Mrs. Bailey.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Gracious Father and God, as we gather this evening, help us to approach our discussions with a spirit of service and cooperation. Help us to diligently carry out our duties with grace, integrity, and respect. Guide our actions so that we may bring about the greatest benefit to our community and its citizens. Please watch over our military, first responders, and all who serve. We ask you these things in your name. Amen.
All right. Approval of minutes. Approval of the minutes of the regular legislative meeting, held on Monday, May 8th, 2023.
Did you do roll?
I am sorry. Clerk, please. Clerk, please call the roll. It is hot in here. Clerk, please call the roll.
You were in the desert. You were in the desert.
Now,
Come on.
because I got a suit jacket.
Clerk, please call the roll.
President Guerrero.
Present.
Mr. Heidick.
Here.
Mrs. Thompson.
Here.
Mrs. Bailey.
Here.
Mrs. Angela.
Here.
Mr. Griffin.
Here.
Mr. Jaber.
Here.
Mrs. Coburn.
Here.
Mrs. Fry.
Here.
All right, thank you. Approval of the minutes. Approval of the minutes for the regular legislative meeting held on Monday, May 8th, 2023. Mr. Heidick?
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the approval of the minutes of the regular legislative meeting from Monday, May 8th, 2023.
Thank you. Mrs. Thompson?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second Mr. Heidick's motion to approve the minutes from Monday, May 8th, 2023.
Thank you. It was moved by Mr. Heidick and seconded by Mrs. Thompson to approve the minutes of the regular legislative meeting held on Monday, May 8th, 2023, as presented. Are there any remarks? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, minutes are adopted. The finance report, acceptance of the finance report for the month of April 2023 as presented. Mr. Heidick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the acceptance of the finance report for the month of April 2023 as presented.
Thank you. And Mrs. Coburn?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second that motion for acceptance of the finance report.
Thank you. It was moved by Mr. Heidick and seconded by Mrs. Coburn to accept the financial report for the month of April 2023 as presented. Are there any remarks? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Financial report is accepted. Petitions and claims.
We have none.
Thank you. Matters requested.
They have all been dispersed.
Thank you. Citizens addressing council. We do have two individuals speaking, so we will start with Mr. Harding. Please come up to the stand. Please state your name, address, and reason for speaking. You have 5 minutes.
Tom Herndon, 904 Meadowwood Drive, Barberton, Ohio, speaking about the legislation to sell city parks. As I think you all know, I'm the current chair of the Parks Commission. Section 603 of the city charter addresses Parks and Recreation. Section 603B gives the Parks Commission, indicates that they shall control, equip, and manage parks, playgrounds, playfields, gymnasiums, swimming pools, indoor recreation centers, and any lands or buildings owned or used by the city for parks or recreational purposes. At our last commission meeting, the Parks Commission voted not to sell College Park, and we also made a recommendation that the issues of Conrad and Harder Park be referred to a committee made up of the Parks Commission, the city administration, city planning, and city council to determine the best use for those 3 parks. So as such, reading 603B, It was a little disconcerting to find out that city council was addressing or thinking about selling these, looking at legislation put before the voters, the sale of these 3 properties without ever having talked to anybody at the Parks Commission. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harder. Mrs. Street? Please step up to the microphone. You can go to that podium just nearest to you. State your name, address, and reason for speaking. You have 5 minutes.
I'm Diane Street, address 649 Mesa Verde Drive, Barberton, Ohio. I have a big concern for the parks, for trying to save those parks for our children, to try to keep them out of the street, off and into an environment where they can feel safe and comfortable. We have these young children, as I brought mine, that need a place to be, to run and exercise some of that energy that they have. And the parks, we have to have them for our children, for their safety, for the love of our community. So I requested that we save those parks so that our children can have a place to go. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Street.
Thank you.
All right, first reading of ordinances and resolutions.
Ordinance number 72-2023, presented by Mr. Hyden. Title, Lease Purchase Ordinance, Fire Truck Acquisition Project. An ordinance authorizing the execution of a municipal lease purchase agreement between Freedom Financial or such other entity as provided herein as lessor and the city as lessee for the purpose of acquiring a fire pumper truck together with all related appurtenances thereto for use by the city and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. Motion to suspend, Mr. Heidick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rule required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
Thank you. Mrs. Coburn?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second that motion for suspension.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mr. Heidick and seconded by Mrs. Coburn to suspend the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension.
Mrs. Angela?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mrs. Fry?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick?
Yes.
Mr. Jaber?
Yes.
Motion for suspension carries. Motion to adopt, Mr. Heidick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to adopt ordinance 72-2023.
Thank you. Mrs. Coburn?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second that motion on adoption.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mr. Heidick and seconded by Mrs. Coburn to adopt ordinance number 72-2023. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick?
Yes.
Mr. Jaber?
Yes.
Mrs. Fry?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mrs. Angela?
Yes.
Motion for adoption carries.
Ordinance number 73-2023, presented by Mrs. Fry. Title, Enter into Contract Atlantic Emergency Solutions. An ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into contract with Atlantic Emergency Solutions in the amount of $875,439 to purchase a Pierce Saber pumper, state bid pricing, and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. Motion to suspend, Mrs. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rules required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
Thank you. Mr. Griffin?
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to second Mrs. Fry's motion on suspension.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mrs. Fry and seconded by Mr. Griffin to suspend the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mrs. Fry?
Yes.
Mrs. Angela?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick?
Yes.
Mr. Jaber?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Motion for suspension carries. Motion to adopt, Mrs. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of ordinance number 73-2023.
Thank you. Mr. Griffin?
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to second Mrs. Fry's motion on adoption.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mrs. Fry and seconded by Mr. Griffin to adopt ordinance number 73-2023. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Jaber?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick?
Yes.
Mrs. Angela?
Yes.
Mrs. Fry?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Motion for adoption carries.
Ordinance number 74-2023 presented by Mr. Jaber. Title, Project Impact Policy Adoption. An ordinance rescinding ordinance number 155-2016 and adopting the project impact policy and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. Motion to suspend, Mr. Jaber.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
Thank you. Mr. Heidick?
Thank you, Mr. President. I will second Counselor Jaber's motion on suspension.
Thank you. Motion was made by Mr. Jaber and seconded by Mr. Heidick to suspend the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension.
Mr. Heidick?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mrs. Angela?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mrs. Fry?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Jaber?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion for suspension carries. Motion to adopt, Mr. Jaber.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for adoption of ordinance number 74-2023.
Thank you. Mr. Heidick?
Thank you, Mr. President. I will second the motion to adopt.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mr. Jaber and seconded by Mr. Heidick to adopt ordinance number 74-2023. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mr. Jaber?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mrs. Angela?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mrs. Fry?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion for adoption carries.
Ordinance number 75-2023 presented by Mr. Jaber. Title, Project Impact Policy. An ordinance amending ordinance number 109-2015, sale of land bank properties, to sell properties that have been placed into the city land bank in accordance with the city's project impact policy and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. Motion to suspend, Mr. Jaber.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the rule as required by Section 5.0 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
Thank you. Mr. Heidick?
Thank you, Mr. President. I will second Counselor Jaber's motion on suspension.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mr. Jaber and seconded by Mr. Heidick to suspend the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension.
Mrs. Fry?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mrs. Angela?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick?
Yes.
Mr. Jaber?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion for suspension carries. Motion to adopt, Mr. Jaber.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of ordinance number 75-2023.
Thank you. Mr. Heidick?
Thank you, Mr. President. I will second the motion to adopt.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mr. Jaber and seconded by Mr. Heidick to adopt ordinance number 75-2023. Are there any remarks? I do just want to say that everybody was involved in getting this done, from the committee all the way to the planning department. This was much needed, so kudos to you. Thank you. Are there any other remarks? All right. Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mr. Jaber?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mrs. Angela?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mrs. Fry?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion for adoption carries.
Resolution number 76-2023 presented by Mrs. Angela. Title, enter into contract, ODOT, Hopkinton Norton Snyder resurfacing, final resolution. A final resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into contract with the Ohio Department of Transportation, ODOT, for the improvement of Hopkinton Avenue from Hillsdale Avenue to 8th Street Northwest, Norton Avenue from 17th Street Northwest to Barber Road, and Snyder Avenue from 2nd Street Southwest to 5th Street Southeast, in the amount of $1,429,155, PID 112735, and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. Motion to suspend, Mrs. Angela.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
Thank you. Mrs. Bailey?
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to second Mrs. Angeloff's motion on suspension.
Thank you. Motion was made by Mrs. Angeloff and seconded by Mrs. Bailey to suspend the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Get me. All right, clerk, please call the roll on suspension.
Mr. Heidick.
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn.
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson.
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey.
Yes.
Mr. Griffin.
Yes.
Mr. Jaber.
Yes.
Mrs. Fry.
Yes.
Mrs. Angela.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion for suspension carries. Motion to adopt, Mrs. Angeloff.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of Resolution 76-2023.
Thank you. And Mrs. Bailey?
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to second Mrs. Angeloff's motion on adoption.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mrs. Angeloff and seconded by Mrs. Bailey to adopt ordinance number 76-2023. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mrs. Bailey.
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson.
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn.
Yes.
Mr. Heidick.
Yes.
Mr. Griffin.
Yes.
Mr. Jaber.
Yes.
Mrs. Fry.
Yes.
Mrs. Angela.
Yes.
Motion for adoption carries.
Ordinance number 77-2023, presented by Mr. Jaber. Title, Purchase of Parkland. An ordinance to provide for the election in order to permit the sale by the City of Barberton College Park and for giving notice thereof. This is the first reading. Barring anything unforeseen, the second reading will be Monday, June 12th, 2023, and the third reading will be Monday, June 26th, 2023. Ordinance 78-2023, presented by Mr. Jaber, title Purchase of Parkland. An ordinance to provide for an election in order to permit the sale by the City of Barberton, Harder Park, and for giving notice thereof. This is the first reading. The second reading, barring anything unforeseen, will be on Monday, June 12, 2023, and the third reading will be on Monday, June 26, 2023. Ordinance number 79-2023, presented by Mr. Jaber. Title, Purchase of Parkland. An ordinance to provide for an election in order to permit the sale by the City of Barberton, Conrad Park, and for giving notice thereof. This is the first reading. Barring anything unforeseen, the second reading will be on Monday, June 12, 2023, and the third reading will be on Monday, June 26, 2023. This ends the first reading.
Second reading of ordinances and resolutions.
We have none.
Third reading of ordinances and resolutions.
We have none.
Miscellaneous and unfinished business.
We have a liquor license that came. There's a new one, C1 and C2, to, I'm going to butcher this, Rambani Incorporated at 290 George Street in Barberton. The letters were sent out. We received objections back from the police and from the safety director. So the application has been returned with a hearing request, and it was sent certified mail on May 15th, 2023.
All right, thank you. Is there any other miscellaneous or unfinished business from council members? From department heads? Anybody have anything? Nothing? All right, well, I do want to mention that we do not have a meeting next week. It is the 5th Monday, so the next meeting will be June 5th here in council chambers. There will be a committee of the whole. Hopefully, the roof will be fixed. No? Okay. All right, yeah, I was hoping. Soon.
Don't wear a suit.
With nothing else, communication from the mayor.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I want to thank everyone who participated in or volunteered for the Jeep Davis 5K this past Saturday, or the Night of Hope Saturday evening. Also, want to thank everyone who participated in the pickleball tournament held at the YMCA. What a great event, and a lot of money being raised for the school kids. So, a lot of great events happening throughout the city here. Change for Change this Friday at Red, White, and Brews, benefiting Friends with Tents, who was here at City Council a few weeks ago. Farmers Market is starting here May 30th. We will, again, kind of a heads up, starting Christmas in July for the collection of non-perishable food items, supporting back in the Salvation Army, so that'll start July 1st. Board of Health this Wednesday and the ARPA meetings have both been canceled for this Wednesday. But the grand opening of the Towpath School is Wednesday afternoon, so the directors were here just the other week, if you recall. As we start the construction season, we do ask for patience. As projects start and get completed, there will be detours, and so we'll keep the lines of communication open. But we're working with the state and other contractors to minimize the negative impacts that everyone's going to feel with these projects. The quicker we can get in, or the contractor can get in, get them done, the better. Want to minimize the impacts on residents, businesses, and other travelers. So with this, we are ready and already starting on the next round of federal funds, grant funds for roads, for our streets. So these grants through AMATs aren't always available. They're not always open, but we know that the next round will be opening up this fall. So we want to make this late summer, early fall. So we want to make sure that we're at the front of the line and have more future success as we're experiencing now. We also understand that by applying for the federal funds for our streets here, these grants aren't always approved, but legislation will be coming to council. If approved, we also know that the money won't come to the city for 5 or 6 years. So again, I want to stress that this is about 80% of the cost, but you have to wait for several years, if approved, to get the money, actually, the project started. So this is not our process, it's the process laid out by the federal government. But again, legislation will be coming to City Council for your support in the application as we move forward. Last week, I was not at City Council. It's my understanding that former Mayor Bob Jeanette spoke in front of Council about property maintenance. He has not reached out to me, but I did want to address that. Took a look at the packet that he gave out.
He just gave it to me.
There's intersections and street names, but no addresses. So I couldn't really look up the address, but I feel confident in saying that the vast majority of these properties or vehicles or what have you are already in the system being worked on. There are 2 pictures of cars on Worcester Road North, parked half on the street, half on the sidewalk. Those have been ticketed, and the cars have been removed. We have a process. Myself and Councilwoman Fry several years ago went and spoke with the City of Akron and how do we improve property maintenance and the streamlining of the processes. So we're doing everything we can. I did submit a request to the law director. If you recall, on the rental registration side, there's flexibility from the property maintenance to levy financial fines against the property owner if the property maintenance violation is not cleaned up in a certain amount of time. So it's up to, I believe, $100 if it's not cleaned up the first time. It's up to $300 or $500 the second time, and then the third time it's even higher, up to. So I requested to see, can we apply this to owner-occupied? We are doing a lot of work. We're all very, very busy, but if there's more flexibility and owner-occupied and rental units are on the same playing field, then the property maintenance inspectors, instead of doing research on which one's a rental unit, which one's not, they can kind of apply the fines evenly and fairly across the board. So we're looking at ways to streamline processes and make it easier. Property maintenance is something that, is a priority for us, and, the council members who stop in on a weekly basis, this is one of the top issues that they bring to my office. And we continue to work with residents. We're getting a lot of newer residents who may be moving from more rural areas who may not, in the communities they're moving from, may not have the same rules. Maybe they're moving from a township to a city and may not realize that in a city you can't do certain things. So in our new resident welcome packet that we hand out, we do have these listed. We do try to meet with them and explain these rules. So this is kind of an ongoing education piece that we're trying to do. So as we meet with residents when we're paving streets, we're getting ready to pave streets, we also bring up property maintenance. This is something that we're going to continue working on. But criticizing me or criticizing the city on property maintenance, it's just not me. So we have meetings throughout the year with the law department, the police department, the fire department, the building department, the planning department, prosecutors, everybody gets in a room and talks about problem areas and how can we best address these issues. So this isn't an issue with one department or administration or whoever. It's the whole city that's working together to try to address these issues. So I want council to know that when we address an issue, when we talk about a specific house or a neighborhood or a street, it's all of us working together to try to address and correct these issues. So if you ever have any questions, please reach out to me, and we can set up a meeting with myself, you, your constituents, whatever department you want, because we all look at things a little differently when it comes to property maintenance. You know, police are going to look at property maintenance a little different than the building department, than zoning versus fire versus, you know, another department, legal. So it's important that we keep that all in our minds. So, any questions on that? Yes.
Thanks, Mayor. Would it be beneficial to have a work session around this for all of council?
Yeah, I don't know, we can talk about how that would be structured. You know, if it's a complaint session, that's fine. I just want to be able to kind of be prepared with the computer so we can look up information on the spot. You know, and the other thing that we've talked about internally, and haven't moved forward with the law department, but we have people out there, landlords, renters, owner-occupied, who have a violation. They fix that violation, correct it in the amount of time given, and then the property maintenance inspector goes by and says, okay, it's fixed, moves on, and then the next day, the violation happens again. So, you know, we have the nuisance rule, mostly for the police. If more than 3 calls in a calendar year, should we have that for residential properties?
Yes, you should.
Because once you've been cited once, you know that that's the rule, right? You've corrected it, and then you're going to go right back to that same behavior the next day or the next week. That's kind of playing the system. So is that something that we need to talk about? So yeah, we can set up a work session and talk about some of the issues you guys are hearing and facing, the issues that we're facing, and how to deal with the issues that you guys bring to us, and then see how we can best correct that. So if you can contact me, we can set something up.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes.
Have you heard anything about the grant request for Lake Anna, or is that just kind of in limbo right now with the debt ceiling talks and all that?
Hopefully it's not a part of those talks, but yeah, so the Lake Anna request to Congresswoman Amelia Sykes' office did make it out of her office. I've been told that they have to pass a budget by September timeframe. They hardly ever do, so be prepared to find something out in October, maybe even November. Does the debt ceiling talk push that back? Maybe. We are lobbying congressional members on the Appropriations Committee, whether they're in Ohio or Texas or wherever, to try to get that pushed through. So that's all the updates I have on that.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks. I thought council had already changed the maintenance to, if there's a nuisance that has multiple, I thought the fee got higher.
I believe that's only applied for the rental,
Oh, okay.
not for owner occupied.
Okay.
You know, the issue has always been, not always, the issue is we've been focusing on rental units, right? But we don't have one person designated just for rental units. So driving down the street, you may not know which one's a rental versus a owner occupied. So, you know, they write the citation, they have to find out who the owner is, where the owner lives. They send a certified letter, and sometimes the people are living out of state. And so it can take some time before they're notified. Once they're notified, once we're notified that they're notified, then the time clock starts, right? So, but the whole time, we have, you know, residents living next to issues who are like, hey, I just want this cleaned up. So it's a lengthy process, and it's not, we're not any different than other communities. So whether it's Akron or Wadsworth, you've reached out to Wadsworth on several occasions, and other communities, it's the same. So it's something that everyone's
I'm
struggling
seeing a lot of issues with vacant lots. So that's something that we have to take on, correct? As a city?
Yeah, we just looked at a lot today, an empty lot. It's been cited by the building department for high grass. It's a buildable lot, and you know, it's a small city-owned buildable lot. There's over $70,000 in back taxes and assessments owed on that. Nobody's going to buy that. So what do you do? I mean, so there's a
You
lot
mow
of
it.
issues out there.
It's got to get mowed.
And it's been cited, so now we give the property owner time, knowing that they're not going to, in this particular case. So we'll go out and we'll mow it. But, you know, if you remember when we restructured the fee schedule for cutting vacant lots, we want to de-incentivize people. We want to spend our tax dollars on cutting city-owned property and parks, not someone else's property. So that kind of takes away from cutting our own property, so. Any other questions? All right, just lastly, Memorial Day next week, fifth Monday as well, as mentioned by the council president. There'll be an event hosted by the VFW at the Military Honor Roll Lake Anna on Monday, so Monday morning, so I hope to see you all there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. With nothing else, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Mr. President.
Oh, I'm sorry. Ms. Angela.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to just apologize to the President and to all council members and guests here that I spoke out because this subject is very, very near to me, and I apologize. I did say what I said because I know the letter came before the sale of the property, so I apologize for my outburst.
Apology acceptable. One more, because we're out of order, so. Mr.
Understood.
Heidick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I too would like to apologize. I don't like to lose my cool like that, and I did. I prefer to keep myself professional with knowledge of the rules and the charter, and I did lose my temper, and for that I do apologize to everyone in this room and everybody at home.
All right, thank you, Mr. Heidick. Thank you, Mrs. Angela. With nothing else, do I have a motion to adjourn? Mr. Heidick?
I'll make that motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Is there a second? Mrs. Thompson?
Thank you, Mr. President. I would second that motion.
All right, it was moved by Mr. Heidick and seconded by Mrs. Thompson that we adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Didn't think so. This meeting is adjourned at 7:07 PM.